England, 1863. The rain pattered softly against the library windows of Ravenscroft Manor as Elara Vance's fingers traced the leather-bound spine of a treasured philosophical text. She sighed contentedly, finding solace in the familiar scent of aged paper and ink that had been her closest companions for most of her 22 years. "Miss Elara!" The sharp, bustling voice of Mrs. Perkins, the housekeeper, broke through her literary reverie. "Your mother has been calling for you these past 10 minutes. The entire household is in an uproar, and here you are, hidden away with your books again." Elara reluctantly closed her book, a faint ripple of annoyance disturbing her inner calm. "What urgent matter requires my attention this time, Mrs. Perkins?" "Has Lydia torn her favorite ball gown yet again?" "Much more significant than that, Miss Elara," Mrs. Perkins replied, her eyes widening with an importance that almost stretched her neatly pinned cap. "Lord Julian Blackwood, the Marquis of Blackwood himself, is coming to London for the season, and your mother, Lady Eleanor, is absolutely determined that he should meet Miss Lydia." Elara rose slowly from her window seat, the news settling upon her with a familiar weight. The Marquis of Blackwood. Even in her quiet corner, his name carried the echo of immense wealth and influence. Elara smoothed the simple blue wool of her dress, plain and unadorned, a stark contrast to the elaborate gowns her younger sister Lydia favored. Another season. Another eligible peer for Lydia to enchant. How utterly novel. "Ah, I see," Elara murmured, the words slipping out before she could censor them, a hint of cynicism she rarely allowed herself. Mother has found a new target for her matrimonial ambitions. She knew her place, far from the glittering prizes her mother sought. The drawing-room was a whirlwind of controlled chaos when Elara entered. Her mother, Lady Elara Vance, was directing servants with the precision of a general commanding troops before a grand battle, every movement a testament to her formidable will. Across the room, Lydia twirled before a large gilt mirror, admiring her cascade of golden curls that caught the afternoon light, a picture of confident, youthful beauty. "There you are, Elara," Lady Eleanor exclaimed, spotting her elder daughter at last. "For heaven's sake, could you not have changed into something more presentable?" She didn't wait for a reply. "Never mind, there's no time now. We've received an invitation to Lady Ashworth's ball tomorrow evening, and Lord Blackwood will be in attendance." Lydia clapped her hands, her blue eyes sparkling. "I shall wear my new blue silk gown with the Belgian lace. Every gentleman will be utterly captivated." "Not every gentleman, my dear," Lady Eleanor corrected, her gaze sharp as she considered Lydia. "Only one matters. The Marquis of Blackwood is known to be extremely selective in his social interactions. He rarely attends London events, but he is one of the wealthiest men in England, and unmarried since the tragic passing of his wife 3 years ago. A truly magnificent catch, Lydia, one we must secure." Elara moved toward the door, her hand resting on the polished wood. "If that's all, Mother, I'll return to my—" "No, you will not," Lady Eleanor interrupted, her voice cutting off Elara's words. "You will attend this ball as well, Elara. A respectable family must present a united front, and your presence is expected." Elara opened her mouth to protest, but was silenced by her mother's raised hand, a clear sign that the discussion was over. She felt a familiar knot of resignation tighten in her stomach. Later that day, in the quiet sanctuary of his study, Lord Alistair Vance, Elara's father, found his wife still buzzing with plans. "Eleanor, my dear," he began gently, setting aside his ledger, "are you not perhaps placing too much emphasis on Lydia's prospects with the Marquis? Our Elara, she has such a sharp mind, such a kind heart, qualities that are far too often overlooked in this society, I fear." Lady Eleanor merely waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense, Alistair. Elara is quite content with her books. Lydia, however, needs a husband worthy of her beauty and our family's standing." "I've asked Miss Albright to assist you in selecting an appropriate gown," Lady Eleanor continued, turning her attention back to Elara, who stood patiently by the door. "Nothing too elaborate, of course. We wouldn't want to distract from Lydia, but presentable enough." Miss Evangeline Albright, the family's governess, nodded from her corner. Though technically employed to educate the Vance daughters, her role had evolved to preparing Lydia for matrimonial success, while Elara, well past her schoolroom days, had become largely invisible in the grand scheme of things. Elara suppressed a sigh. "Yes, Lady Eleanor," Miss Albright replied quietly, her gaze holding a flicker of sympathy for Elara. "Perhaps the forest green would suit Miss Elara. It's modest yet becoming, and certainly would not draw undue attention." Elara merely inclined her head. "Forest green it is, then." She agreed, the words flat. She knew her role, and it was not to shine. She was merely to be present, a backdrop against which Lydia's brilliance could truly sparkle. As she slipped from the drawing-room, Elara encountered Sophie Davies, Lydia's lady's maid, struggling with an armful of elaborate gowns. "Let me help you, Sophie," Elara offered, taking several of the frothy confections. "Thank you, Miss Elara." Sophie smiled gratefully, her brow furrowed. Miss Lydia couldn't decide which gowns to have pressed for the upcoming events, so she selected all of them, naturally. Elara shook her head with a wry smile. "It's an important season," Sophie replied diplomatically. "The Marquis's arrival has everyone in a state." "Everyone except me," Elara murmured. Sophie paused, her gaze steady. "If I may be so bold, Miss Elara, you shouldn't discount yourself so readily. Beauty isn't everything in the marriage market." "It certainly helps," Elara replied, but she squeezed Sophie's arm appreciatively. "Thank you, though." In the quiet of her bedchamber that evening, Elara stood before her mirror, studying her reflection without illusions. Where Lydia was all golden curls, azure eyes, and rosy cheeks, Elara was tall and slender, with chestnut hair that stubbornly refused to hold a curl, and eyes a peculiar shade of amber. Not unattractive, perhaps, but certainly not the classical beauty that London society worshipped. "It matters not," she told her reflection firmly. "I have my books, my correspondence with fellow intellectuals, my charitable work. Love and marriage were never in my future." Yet as she turned away from the mirror, a small, treacherous part of her heart whispered, "But what if they could be?" The thought was quickly pushed away, like a stray wisp of hair. The next morning, Ravenscroft Manor buzzed with heightened activity. Lady Eleanor oversaw final preparations for Lydia's gown and hair with a keen eye, ensuring every ribbon was perfectly placed, every curl immaculately arranged. Miss Albright moved quietly, efficiently, ensuring everything was perfect for Lydia's grand entrance into society. "More pins, Miss Albright. We cannot have a single curl out of place for such an important evening," Lady Eleanor commanded, her voice sharp with anticipation. Lydia, meanwhile, hummed a tune, her excitement palpable. In her own bedchamber, just before the ball, Lydia sat before her vanity, Sophie carefully adjusting a delicate lace ribbon in her golden hair. "Lord Percival was quite poetic last night, wasn't he?" Sophie remarked, a gentle smile playing on her lips. Lydia sighed, a faint, almost imperceptible sound. "He spoke only of my angelic countenance and heavenly tresses for an hour, Sophie. It grows tiresome sometimes. I wish they would see more than just the surface." Sophie met her eyes in the mirror, offering a knowing look. "Perhaps, one day, they will, Miss Lydia." Just before departing for the ball, Lord Alistair sought out Lady Eleanor in his study. "Eleanor," he began, his voice low and earnest, though his gaze was steady, "I ask you, please, to spare a thought for Elara this evening. Do not let her be entirely overshadowed. She has a keen mind, you know, and her academic achievements are far more impressive than any social graces. Her heart is truly kind." He looked at his wife, a silent plea in his eyes. Lady Eleanor, however, merely brushed off his concerns with an impatient gesture. "Alistair, my dear, Elara is quite content with her books and her quiet pursuits. It is Lydia's match that holds the key to our family's continued standing. The Marquis is an invaluable prize, and all our efforts must be directed toward securing him." She swept from the study, leaving Lord Alistair with a sigh. While the manor buzzed with preparations, Elara had spent the afternoon in her bedchamber, not fretting over gowns or potential suitors, but immersed in her true passion. She was drafting a letter to Professor Silas Croft, a respected Oxford academic, with whom she maintained a lively intellectual correspondence. Her quill danced across the page, articulating her thoughts on a recently published philosophical text, finding a profound sense of comfort and purpose in the exchange of ideas. This was her sanctuary, her true engagement. As evening descended, the Vance family carriage rolled through the bustling streets of London, thick with the anticipation of the social season. Elegant carriages lined the thoroughfares, their occupants dressed in their finest, all heading towards the glittering events of the night. Inside, Lady Eleanor gave Lydia a final flurry of instructions. "Remember your curtsy, darling. Smile, but not too broadly, and always ensure your profile is towards the Marquis." Lydia nodded eagerly, while Elara watched the passing streetlights, her own thoughts a quiet counterpoint to the vibrant city outside. The carriage arrived at Lady Ashworth's grand townhouse, a magnificent edifice that glittered with hundreds of candles and gas lamps. Liveried footmen moved with practiced efficiency, opening carriage doors and escorting guests up the wide marble steps. Elara, stepping out, felt a familiar detachment as she observed the scene. The dazzling jewels, the rustle of silk, the excited murmurs of the arriving guests. It was a spectacle, and she, as ever, felt like an anonymous observer rather than a participant. Lady Ashworth's ballroom glittered with candlelight, reflecting off crystal chandeliers and ladies, jewels alike. The air hummed with music and conversation. Elara remained near the wall, instinctively seeking the periphery, observing the vibrant scene with detached interest. She took a moment to compose herself, to mentally don the invisible cloak she usually wore at such events, content to watch the dance of society unfold from a safe distance. Lydia, a vision in blue silk, was quickly surrounded by a throng of admirers, her golden curls catching the light as she held court. Lady Eleanor, meanwhile, scanned the room expectantly, her gaze darting towards the entrance, a general awaiting the arrival of her most significant adversary, or, in this case, her most coveted prize. Elara watched, a faint smile playing on her lips, knowing that the true main player of the evening had yet to make his dramatic entrance. Lady Ashworth's ballroom glittered with 1,000 candle flames, reflecting off crystal chandeliers and the dazzling jewels adorning London's elite. The air hummed with music and laughter, a vibrant symphony of high society. Elara Vance, as was her custom, remained near the wall, a quiet observer of the swirling spectacle. Her simple lavender gown, chosen by Miss Albright, allowed her to blend into the periphery, a role she had long embraced. Across the vast floor, her younger sister Lydia already held court, a dazzling sun around which a galaxy of admiring gentlemen orbited. The evening was in full, magnificent swing. "Your sister is quite the success, Miss Elara," a familiar voice remarked beside her. Elara turned, a faint smile touching her lips, to find Mr. Finch, Lady Ashworth's loyal butler, standing nearby with a tray of sparkling lemonade. He had known her since she was a girl, and his eyes held a rare understanding. "Indeed, Mr. Finch," Elara replied, accepting a glass. "Lydia was born for such triumphs. And yet you seem content to remain on the periphery, Miss Elara." She took a sip, the tart sweetness, a welcome contrast to the cloying scent of lilies. "The periphery offers the best view, wouldn't you agree? One sees everything without truly being seen." Mr. Finch's lips quirked in a knowing smile, his composed posture unwavering despite the bustling crowd around them. "A perspective I often find myself appreciating, Miss Elara. It is a rare quality to find contentment in observation, rather than constant participation." He offered her a small confection from his tray. "It speaks to a certain strength of character, I believe." Elara offered him a grateful nod, appreciating his quiet validation. For a brief moment, amidst the glittering superficiality, she felt truly understood. A sudden, almost imperceptible hush fell over the room. Conversations faltered, heads turned, and the throng of guests parted like a velvet curtain. All eyes were drawn to the grand entrance where a tall, commanding figure now stood. His very presence seemed to absorb the light and quiet the revelry. "Lord Julian Blackwood, Marquis of Blackwood," Mr. Finch murmured, his voice hushed with reverence, before he discreetly returned to his duties. Elara felt a prickle of anticipation. a strange stir in her usually placid heart, as the air itself seemed to crackle with importance. Elara observed the newcomer with a scholar's keen eye. Lord Julian Blackwood moved with the unhurried confidence of a man accustomed to power, his dark evening clothes impeccably tailored to his broad shoulders. His face was not conventionally handsome in the soft, pleasing way society admired. It was too severe, with sharp cheekbones and a strong, unyielding jaw. Yet it was undeniably striking, etched with a certain gravitas. His eyes, dark and penetrating, surveyed the room with a cool, almost distant assessment, as if seeking something beyond the surface glamour. Elara felt a peculiar sense of intrigue. Lady Elara Vance wasted no time. Her head, adorned with an elaborate coiffure, swiveled towards the Marquis, her eyes alight with purpose. Within moments she had expertly navigated Lydia, a vision in blue silk, directly into Lord Blackwood's path. Lydia, ever graceful, executed a flawless curtsy, her golden curls shimmering under the chandeliers. Her smile, practiced yet dazzling, was aimed squarely at the Marquis, a silent invitation to admire. Elara watched, a familiar sense of resignation settling over her. Lydia rose from her deep curtsy, her blue eyes sparkling with anticipation. Lord Blackwood bowed correctly, a precise, formal gesture that conveyed respect without warmth. He exchanged a few polite words with Lydia, his voice a deep, resonant rumble that carried faintly across the hushed space. Lydia's laughter, light and melodious, followed, undoubtedly a response to some charming pleasantry. The scene unfolded exactly as Lady Eleanor had meticulously planned, a perfect tableau of aristocratic introduction. Yet Elara, observing from her quiet vantage point, noted a subtle deviation. Lord Blackwood's gaze, though polite, did not linger on Lydia's renowned beauty as most gentlemen's did. His dark eyes moved swiftly, assessing, but not captivated. There was no prolonged admiration, no hint of the besotted enchantment that typically followed Lydia's dazzling smile. It was a brief, unlingering glance, a fact that surprised Elara more than she cared to admit. A flicker of unexpected intrigue stirred within her. The evening progressed predictably. Lydia danced every set, a radiant jewel at the center of the ballroom, while Lady Eleanor hovered, a proud general surveying her successful campaign. Elara, meanwhile, alternated between observing the festivities and engaging in conversation with several elderly ladies who, to her delight, genuinely appreciated her knowledge of contemporary literature and current events. In these quiet discussions, she found a familiar comfort, a brief respite from the social pressures that pulsed around them. It was during one such conversation, discussing the latest historical treatises, that Elara became acutely aware of a presence at her side. A subtle shift in the air, a scent of expensive wool and faint pipe tobacco. Looking up, her breath caught in her throat. She found herself staring directly into the dark, penetrating eyes of Lord Julian Blackwood. "Miss Vance, I believe?" His voice was deep, with a hint of a northern accent, and it startled her with its unexpected proximity. Elara curtsied, her mind scrambling for composure. "Your Grace." "Yes, I am Elara Vance. Lady Harrington was just telling me of your interest in contemporary literature," Lord Blackwood continued, his gaze unwavering. "You've read Mr. Dickens's latest work, Our Mutual Friend?" Elara, momentarily forgetting her surroundings, felt a spark of genuine enthusiasm. "I have, Your Grace." "I found his social commentary particularly incisive, especially his critique of inherited wealth and the rigidities of class. The way he dissects human nature beneath the veneer of respectability is simply masterful." Her words tumbled out, eager and unbidden. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or a nascent interest. Most young ladies prefer Mr. Dickens's romantic plots to his social observations, he noted, a subtle challenge in his tone. Elara, emboldened by the rare intellectual engagement, felt a familiar surge of candidness. "I am not most young ladies, Your Grace." The words slipped out before she could censor them, a flash of her authentic self breaking through the societal facade. Instead of taking offense, Lord Blackwood's mouth curved slightly, a genuine, almost imperceptible smile that softened his severe features. "No," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I don't believe you are, Miss Vance." The flicker in his eyes deepened, a clear sign of intrigue. For a fleeting moment, Elara felt truly seen, not as a wallflower, nor as Lydia's plain elder sister, but as herself, an individual whose mind held value. A warmth spread through her, both unsettling and exhilarating. Across the ballroom, Elara could feel the heat of her mother's gaze, sharp and incredulous. Lady Eleanor was watching them with barely concealed horror, her carefully constructed plans for Lydia momentarily forgotten. Lydia's circle of admirers, too, glanced over in confusion, wondering why the season's most eligible marquis was conversing so intently with the overlooked elder Miss Vance. The subtle shift in the room's energy was palpable, a testament to the unexpectedness of Lord Blackwood's attention. "I understand Ravenscroft Manor possesses an impressive library," Lord Blackwood continued, his gaze holding Elara's. "I myself am a collector of rare editions. Perhaps I might call upon your family and discuss our mutual literary interests." Before Elara could respond, Lady Eleanor materialized at her side, her smile a strained mask of graciousness. "Your Grace, how delightful that you've met my elder daughter. But you simply must meet Lydia properly. She's just finished playing the pianoforte. Such a talented girl." Julian's expression cooled, but he did not waver. "Indeed, Lady Vance," Lord Blackwood replied politely, though his dark eyes remained on Elara for a fraction longer than etiquette allowed. "However, Miss Elara and I were discussing literature. Perhaps another time." He offered a brief, correct bow to Elara. "Until we meet again, Miss Vance. I look forward to continuing our conversation." As he walked away, Lady Eleanor rounded on Elara, her voice a low, furious hiss. "What did you say to him, Elara?" "The Marquis barely looked at Lydia all evening, and now he's speaking of calling on us because of you and your books." "We merely discussed Mr. Dickens, Mother." "Goodness gracious." Elara couldn't help the slight exasperation in her voice. Lady Eleanor pressed a hand to her forehead, as if warding off a headache. "Literature of all things." "Well," she sighed, a calculating glint replacing her horror, "if his interest in books brings him to Ravenscroft, we must use the opportunity wisely. Lydia will wear her pink muslin tomorrow. It makes her look positively angelic." Elara suppressed a sigh of her own. The battle for the Marquis's attention, it seemed, was far from over. Later that night, as Sophie helped Elara undress, her lady's maid commented, "Lord Blackwood seemed most attentive to you this evening, Miss Elara." Elara shook her head, a small, weary smile on her face. "He was merely being polite to a wallflower, Sophie. A man of his standing would never truly notice someone like me." Sophie paused, her fingers gently brushing Elara's chestnut hair. "I don't think so, miss. Mr. Finch says his Grace is known for his discernment. He doesn't waste time on empty pleasantries. He looked at you, Miss Elara, not merely through you." Elara tried to dismiss Sophie's words, yet they echoed in her mind. Men like Lord Julian Blackwood, married women like Lydia, beautiful, accomplished, perfect for a marchioness. Her life, she had long decided, was meant for the quiet companionship of books and correspondence. Love and marriage were never in her future. But as she lay in bed, staring into the darkness, she couldn't help recalling the brief spark of connection she'd felt when discussing literature with the Marquis. For a moment, just a moment, she had been seen, not as Lydia's plain elder sister, but as herself. "Foolish thoughts," she whispered, pulling the covers tighter. Morning will bring reality back into focus. Hidden in a shadowed corner of the ballroom, Lady Seraphina Covington watched the exchange between Lord Blackwood and Elara Vance with a cold, calculating intensity. Her beautiful features, usually arranged in an expression of elegant charm, were momentarily marred by a hint of past resentment, a flash of bitterness in her striking blue eyes. Julian, conversing with her, the bookish Miss Vance, after barely acknowledging Lydia, a subtle tremor of anger ran through her. This was not merely an oversight. It was a perceived slight, a reopening of old wounds. She would not forget it. The morning after the ball, Elara found herself in the morning room, contemplating the events of the previous night. When Mr. Finch entered, polishing a silver tea service, she seized the opportunity. "Mr. Finch," she began, her voice carefully casual, "I couldn't help but overhear some rather peculiar chatter last night regarding Lord Blackwood's recent travels." She paused, choosing her words with precision. "Someone mentioned he had recently returned from Vienna, but I distinctly recalled reading in the Gazette that he was in Rome only 2 weeks prior. A simple confusion, I suppose, but I am curious about the source of such a factual inaccuracy." Mr. Finch, ever discreet, merely inclined his head. "Indeed, Miss Elara. Society often misremembers details. I shall endeavor to clarify if the opportunity arises." Elara merely nodded, satisfied. A small seed of doubt, subtly planted, could sometimes work wonders. Later that morning, in the quiet sanctuary of the library, Elara sat at her writing desk, a quill scratching softly across parchment. She recalled her conversation with Mr. Finch and the vague, almost dismissive tone of the lady she'd overheard mentioning Vienna. It had been Lady Seraphina Covington. Elara paused, then began drafting a letter to Professor Silas Croft, a respected Oxford academic with whom she maintained a lively intellectual correspondence. Casually, almost as an aside in a discussion about classical architecture, she included a subtle observation about the recent Gazette article on Roman antiquities, and how it had correctly noted Lord Blackwood's presence in Rome, contrasting it with a quaint but erroneous rumor she'd heard about his being in Vienna. Professor Croft, a stickler for accuracy and a man with extensive, though quiet, social connections, would undoubtedly address such an inaccuracy in his own erudite circles. That night, as the moon cast silver shadows across her bedchamber, Elara reflected on the day. Lord Blackwood's unexpected interest, her mother's frantic calculations, and her own small, subtle act of countering a minor piece of misinformation. It was a precarious position, navigating the treacherous waters of society with such a discerning man's attention. A spark of quiet determination, unfamiliar yet welcome, kindled within her. The game had begun, and Elara, for the first time, felt a strange readiness to play, even as trepidation fluttered in her heart. What would tomorrow bring? Ravenscroft Manor was a flurry of activity the following afternoon, a stark contrast to the quiet, scholarly sanctuary Elara had enjoyed just hours before. The first glimpse of Lord Blackwood's elegant carriage turning up the drive sent the household into a frenzy. Lady Elara Vance, her face flushed with excitement and urgency, frantically adjusted Lydia's golden curls, muttering instructions to Mrs. Perkins, who bustled past with a vase of freshly cut flowers. "He's here. Goodness, he's early. Mrs. Perkins, are the refreshments arranged precisely? And the drawing-room curtains? They must catch the light just so." In the drawing-room, Lady Eleanor darted about like a frantic hummingbird. "Elara, for heaven's sake, at least pinch your cheeks for some color. You look as though you've been buried in a tome for a week, which I suppose you have." Elara, however, ignored the instruction, remaining seated with her embroidery, her needle moving steadily through the fabric. She was dressed in the forest green gown Miss Albright had selected, simple and modest, as instructed. A faint tremor of anticipation, unwelcome and surprising, rippled beneath her usual composure. Julian Blackwood was known for his punctuality, yet his early arrival spoke of a certain determination. Elara calmly continued her embroidery, her hands steady despite the rising tension in the room. Her mother's demands washed over her, a familiar background hum to the quiet world she carried within herself. She felt composed, almost detached, as though she were an observer in a play, waiting for her cue to perform the expected social pleasantries. It was a role she had mastered long ago. His Grace, the Marquis of Blackwood. Mr. Finch, the butler, announced with his usual perfect gravity, though Elara caught the slightest twinkle in his eye as he glanced her way. Lord Julian Blackwood entered the drawing-room, his commanding presence instantly calming the frantic energy Lady Eleanor had generated. Today, his tall frame was clothed in a perfectly tailored riding coat of bottle green, his cravat impeccably tied. "Lady Vance, "Miss Lydia! Miss Elara!" He greeted each with a bow, his gaze polite yet fleeting for Lady Eleanor and Lydia. But Elara couldn't help noticing that his dark eyes lingered on her for a fraction of a second longer than propriety dictated. A warmth spread through her, surprising in its intensity. "Your Grace, what an unexpected pleasure!" Lady Eleanor simpered, her voice dripping with an artificial sweetness that made Elara wince internally. Lydia was just about to practice her harp. "Perhaps you would care to listen?" Her repertoire is quite extensive, and her touch simply angelic. Lydia, poised by the instrument, offered a practiced, hopeful smile, her golden head tilted artfully. Julian smiled politely, a cool, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. "Perhaps later, Lady Vance." Julian's gaze, though polite, did not waver from Lady Eleanor. "Actually," he continued, his voice deep and smooth, "I've come to inquire whether Miss Elara might show me the library she spoke of. I understand the Vance collection contains some noteworthy first editions, particularly in the realm of romantic poetry." Elara's breath hitched. She felt a shock, like a small, unexpected current, run through her. He had remembered. He had come for her. A stunned silence fell over the room. Lydia's porcelain face registered shock, her harp forgotten, while Lady Eleanor looked as though she might faint, her hand flying to her chest. "The library?" Lady Eleanor repeated weakly, her voice barely a whisper, as if Julian had requested to visit the scullery, not a room of scholarship. The audacity, the unexpectedness of it, rendered her speechless. Yes, if it wouldn't be an imposition. Julian's expression remained impassive, but Elara, watching him closely, detected a hint of amusement in his dark eyes. A subtle challenge, perhaps, to the stifling expectations of her family. "Of course, Your Grace." Elara rose, setting aside her embroidery. "I would be happy to show you our modest collection." He offered his arm with a slight incline of his head. "Excellent. Lead the way, Miss Vance." As they left the drawing-room, Elara could practically feel her mother's bewildered gaze burning into her back. In the corridor, she couldn't suppress a small smile. "You've caused quite a stir, Your Grace," she observed quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Julian raised an eyebrow, a hint of genuine amusement now visible in his eyes. "Have I? I merely expressed interest in literature, something you and I discussed yesterday." His tone was innocent, but his gaze held a knowing spark. "In this household," Elara replied, her smile broadening slightly, "expressing interest in anything related to me rather than my sister is tantamount to announcing the sky is falling. My mother has very particular ambitions for Lydia." Julian's mouth quirked into a more pronounced smile. "How refreshingly honest you are, Miss Vance." Most young ladies would pretend false modesty, or at the very least feign ignorance of their family's machinations. He seemed to find her candor genuinely charming. They reached the library, a wood-paneled sanctuary filled with the comforting scent of aged leather and paper. Elara felt herself relax as the door closed behind them, muffling the distant sounds of the bustling house. Here, amidst the quiet wisdom of countless authors, she felt a sense of peace. It was a relative privacy, of course. She knew Miss Albright would soon manufacture a reason to check on them, as propriety demanded. But for now, they had this space. "Now," Elara said, turning to face the Marquis, her amber eyes meeting his dark ones directly. She felt a surge of boldness, knowing this was her chance to cut through the societal niceties. "What is your true purpose in calling today, Your Grace?" "I suspect it wasn't merely to see our modest collection of first editions." Her question hung in the air, a challenge and an invitation to honesty. Lord Julian Blackwood studied her for a moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "Direct as well as honest. Refreshing qualities, Miss Vance." He moved to examine the bookshelves, running his fingertips lightly along the spines of various volumes. "I meant what I said about our mutual literary interests. But you're right. I had another purpose." He paused, a shadow passing over his austere features. "I wish to explain something to you about my past. Specifically, about Lady Seraphina Covington. There was an understanding between us many years ago before my first marriage, a broken understanding due to family pressure and her perceived flightiness. It left her, and me, with a deep-seated resentment that I believe she has never truly overcome. He gazed into the distance, his expression pained. My family, particularly my father, did not approve of Seraphina's vivacious nature. They deemed her too impulsive, too modern for a future Marchioness of Blackwood. They pushed for a more suitable match, Lady Annalise. His voice roughened slightly. I chose duty over my heart, and it was a mistake I have regretted ever since. Seraphina was humiliated, and I learned a harsh lesson about the weight of expectations. It made me wary of society, of shallow attractions, of everything that led to that broken understanding and my subsequent unhappy marriage. Julian turned to her, his dark eyes holding hers intently. My past experiences made me deeply disillusioned with societal expectations and superficial matches. I vowed never again to allow such pressures to dictate my life or my heart, which is why I find myself intrigued by you, Miss Vance. The directness of his gaze, the sincerity in his voice, sent a shiver through Elara. It was a statement that carried immense weight. Elara felt heat rise to her cheeks, a mix of compassion for his past and a familiar pang of insecurity. I am sorry to hear of your past difficulties, Your Grace. That sounds most painful. She paused then, unable to help herself, the words slipping out before she could censor them. You mean I lack beauty and accomplishments? That I am a safe, sensible contrast to your previous experiences? The Marquis turned to her, his expression suddenly stern. I mean, you possess intelligence and authenticity. Rare qualities indeed, Miss Vance. Beauty is common. Genuine character is not. He selected a volume from the shelf, his fingers tracing the gilded title. Ah, Shelley, another favorite of mine. His spirit, so defiant against convention, resonates deeply. They spent the next hour discussing poetry, philosophy, and literature. Elara found herself engrossed in their conversation, momentarily forgetting the vast social gulf between them. Julian was erudite, with trenchant observations and a dry wit that made her laugh aloud several times. He spoke of the Romantics with a passion that surprised and delighted her, comparing their revolutionary spirit to the quiet rebellions found in everyday life. For that hour, she was simply Elara, an intellectual equal, her thoughts and opinions valued. It was a connection she had longed for, but never truly expected to find. As predicted, Miss Albright eventually appeared, bearing a silver tea tray. Her curious gaze moved between them as she arranged the service on a small table. Your mother wonders if you and His Grace would care to join them in the drawing-room, Miss Elara, she said pointedly, her eyes lingering for a moment on the Marquis. It was a polite interruption, but an interruption nonetheless. Please inform Lady Vance that Miss Elara has been an excellent guide to your library, Julian replied smoothly, his tone polite but firm. We shall join the company shortly. After Miss Albright departed, a faint sigh escaped Julian's lips. And so propriety reasserts itself. A pity. I was enjoying our conversation immensely. As was I, Elara admitted, a genuine wistfulness in her voice. It's rare to find someone who appreciates literature as more than mere entertainment. Indeed. Julian hesitated, then turned fully to face her, his dark eyes earnest. Miss Vance, would you permit me to call on you again? Perhaps we might continue our discussion on Shelley, or perhaps delve into the merits of the utilitarian philosophers. Elara's heart stuttered, a wild, hopeful flutter in her chest. I would like that, Your Grace, she replied, her voice a little breathy. Though I must warn you, my mother will be thoroughly confused by your continued attention. A genuine smile, warm and utterly charming, transformed his austere features. It softened the sharp lines of his face and lit his dark eyes with a captivating warmth. Let her be confused, then, he said, his voice low and rich. I find I care little for society's expectations these days. They have proven a poor guide in the past. His disregard for convention was a balm to Elara's soul. When they returned to the drawing-room, Lydia was performing a sentimental ballad on the harp, her golden head bent artfully over the strings, catching the afternoon light. She looked up with a dazzling smile as they entered. Your Grace, I hope you found our library satisfactory, Lady Eleanor said, gesturing for them to be seated, her smile a little too wide. Lydia has been practicing this piece especially, knowing of your fondness for music. Most thoughtful. Julian replied politely, though his gaze kept returning to Elara. "Your library is indeed a treasure, Lady Vance. Miss Elara's knowledge of its contents is impressive." Lady Eleanor's smile faltered slightly, her eyes darting between Julian and Elara, a flicker of bewilderment in their depths. The unexpected compliment, directed at Elara, clearly threw her off balance. "Yes, well, Elara has always been our scholarly daughter." Lady Eleanor recovered quickly, albeit weakly. "Lydia, darling, perhaps the Italian aria next? The one with the particularly challenging cadenza?" Julian rose before Lydia could begin, however, offering a polite bow. "Forgive me, Lady Vance, but I have another engagement this afternoon." "Lady Vance, Miss Lydia, Miss Elara, thank you for your hospitality." His departure was as swift and decisive as his arrival, leaving Lady Eleanor with a wavering, bewildered smile. As Mr. Finch, ever the picture of discreet efficiency, opened the grand oak doors of Ravenscroft Manor for Lord Julian Blackwood, the Marquis paused. He turned, his dark eyes finding Elara where she stood a little apart, near the sweeping staircase. "Until next time, Miss Vance," he murmured, his voice pitched low, for her ears alone. The words were a quiet promise, a silken thread woven between them in the bustling hall. Elara felt a blush creep up her neck, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the chilly evening air. The moment the front door closed, Lady Eleanor rounded on Elara, her face a mask of bewilderment and frustration. "What in heaven's name did you say to him, Elara?" 2 hours in the library, discussing books of all things. Lydia barely had a chance to showcase her accomplishments. Elara merely shrugged, though her mind still whirled with Julian's words, his intense gaze. "We merely discussed Mr. Dickens, Mother. Nothing more." But even as she spoke, a treacherous thought whispered. Was she merely a novelty? An amusement until he inevitably turned his attention to a more suitable match like Lydia. Later at dinner, Lord Alistair, noticing her quietness, remarked, "You're very still tonight, dear." "Merely tired, Father," Elara replied, though in truth she was more awake than she had ever been. The following morning, as Elara sought refuge in the garden, strolling among the Duchess roses, Mr. Finch approached along the gravel path. "Miss Elara," he said, his voice discreet, "a message from His Grace." He handed her a small, elegantly wrapped package. Curious, Elara unwrapped the parcel to find a leather-bound volume of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's sonnets. A note was tucked inside. "Miss Vance, our discussion of romantic poetry reminded me of this volume. Perhaps you might find it of interest. I look forward to hearing your thoughts when next we meet. Yours, Blackwood." Elara clutched the book to her chest, a surge of delight and disbelief warring within her. "Did His Grace say anything else, Mr. Finch?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The butler's expression remained impassive, but his eyes held understanding. "Only that he found today's conversation most stimulating, miss." That evening, reading by candlelight in the quiet of her bedchamber, Elara found a passage marked in the Book of Sonnets. Her fingers traced the words, a tremor running through her. "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach." The lines seemed to leap from the page, imbued with Julian's deep voice, his intense gaze. Could he truly be interested in her in such a profound way? The possibility seemed too fantastical to contemplate, a dream plucked from the pages of one of her beloved novels. She closed the book, pressing it to her heart, the warmth of the leather a small comfort against her burgeoning hope. The following weeks stretched into months as winter gave way to early spring. Julian continued his attentions to Elara, their intellectual connection deepening with each meeting. They discovered shared interests beyond literature, a passion for educational reform, a concern for the working conditions in northern factories, a love of classical music that led to evenings at the opera where Julian was seen gazing at Elara rather than the stage. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, a symphony of ideas and shared values that transcended the superficial pleasantries of society. In the Ravenscroft Manor gardens, they walked for hours, discussing everything from the plight of the urban poor to the nuances of philosophical thought. Julian listened intently, his dark eyes alight with interest, offering trenchant observations and a dry wit that made Elara laugh freely, a sound she rarely indulged in public. At the opera, amidst the glittering throngs, Elara would catch Julian's gaze across the dimly lit box, a silent acknowledgment of their shared world, a world where her thoughts and opinions were not just tolerated, but celebrated. Their bond became impossible for London society to ignore. Whispers followed them from the opera house to the salons, fueled by Julian's unwavering attention to Elara, the blue-stocking sister, rather than the dazzling Lydia. At social functions, Julian's gaze often sought Elara, a subtle but undeniable pull between them. Elara, though still reserved, found herself meeting his eyes more readily, a faint blush often coloring her cheeks at his steady, appreciative regard. Their connection was a quiet rebellion against the season's expectations. By April, when the gardens of Ravenscroft Manor burst into bloom, Julian's attachment to Elara was the talk of London. He called at the Vance home 3 times each week, each time seeking Elara's company. They walked in the sun-dappled garden, discussed books in the library, and even rode together in the park, always properly chaperoned, but clearly engrossed in each other's company. Society, initially confused, now watched with a mixture of fascination and speculation, wondering at the Marquis's unconventional choice. One crisp evening in the drawing-room, Lady Eleanor, ever the pragmatist, vacillated between confusion and a new, desperate calculation. "Perhaps we should encourage this strange friendship," she told Lord Alistair, tapping her fan against her chin. "If Elara becomes the Marquis's confidant, she might influence him toward Lydia. Surely he will eventually see Lydia's charms for a wife." Lord Alistair, seated by the fire, looked doubtful, his gaze fixed on the flames. "Eleanor, my dear," Lord Alistair said gently, his voice firm despite its quiet tone, "I believe the Marquis's interest in our Elara may be more than friendship. He is a discerning man." Lady Eleanor scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Nonsense! He's a marquis. Marquises marry beautiful, accomplished girls like Lydia, not blue stockings like Elara. You are being fanciful, Alistair." Her voice rose slightly, betraying her irritation. "Our elder daughter has many fine qualities, my dear. Perhaps the Marquis sees them more clearly than we have," Lord Alistair replied, his gaze unwavering. A week before the highly anticipated Wentworth Ball, a prestigious invitation arrived, embossed with the ducal crest. Lady Eleanor clutched it, her eyes sparkling with renewed ambition. "The Wentworth Ball! This is it, Lydia, my dear! The perfect opportunity! Lord Blackwood will surely be in attendance, and everyone who matters. We must ensure you are utterly breathtaking." Elara, overhearing from the doorway, merely sighed. Another stage for Lydia to shine, and for her to fade into the background. Unbeknownst to Lady Eleanor, Lord Alistair had made a discreet visit to a renowned London dressmaker, accompanied only by Sophie. "I wish for a gown for my elder daughter, Miss Elara," he had instructed, his voice low, "something that reflects her inner radiance, not merely the latest fashion." Sophie, with a knowing smile, helped select a fabric of deep sapphire blue, a color that would brighten Elara's peculiar amber eyes and complement her chestnut hair. It was a secret act of love, a quiet defiance of his wife's superficial priorities. The day of the Wentworth Ball, in the quiet sanctuary of Elara's bedchamber, Sophie worked her magic. She arranged Elara's chestnut hair, which usually refused to hold a curl, into a soft, elegant chignon, allowing a few delicate tendrils to frame her face. The deep sapphire gown, commissioned by her father, cascaded gracefully, its rich color brightening Elara's amber eyes and lending her an unexpected air of sophistication. Elara studied her reflection, a flicker of surprise in her own gaze. "It is becoming, Sophie," she murmured. "More than becoming, Miss Elara," Sophie replied with a warm smile. You look precisely as you are. Remarkable." When Elara entered the drawing room, a stunned silence fell. Miss Albright, who rarely showed emotion, exclaimed, "Miss Elara, you look transformed." Lydia, ever generous, clapped her hands in delight. "Oh, Elara, you look lovely, doesn't she, Mother?" Lady Eleanor studied her elder daughter with a mixture of surprise and reluctant admiration. "Indeed," she conceded, her voice a little strained. "Quite presentable." Elara felt a warmth, a quiet satisfaction, knowing that for once she was not merely tolerated, but genuinely seen. Lydia's delight was unfeigned, her compliment echoing with genuine affection rather than competitive undertones. "Doesn't she, Mother?" she repeated, turning to Lady Eleanor, seeking validation for Elara's appearance. Lady Eleanor's smile was still a little stiff, but she managed a nod. Lydia squeezed Elara's hand, a silent message of sisterly support that meant more than any formal praise. It was a small, but significant, shift in their dynamic, a hint of the deeper understanding that was beginning to blossom between them. As the Vance carriage prepared to depart for the ball, Lord Julian Blackwood arrived to escort them, his presence an immediate testament to his continued attention. His dark eyes, usually so reserved, widened appreciatively at the sight of Elara in her sapphire gown. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice a low, warm rumble, as he took her gloved hand and pressed it gently. "You are radiant tonight." Elara felt a flush bloom on her cheeks, a deeper, more genuine blush than any she had experienced before. His words were a direct validation, a private compliment shared in the midst of public scrutiny. The Wentworth ball glittered with candle-lit splendor, but the true spectacle began when Julian, Marquis of Blackwood, asked Elara Vance for not one, but two dances, the waltz and the supper dance. These were coveted slots, usually reserved for the season's undisputed beauties, and his choice of Elara, the bluestocking sister, sent a ripple of scandal and excited whispers through the ballroom. As they circled the floor, Elara was acutely aware of every eye, every hushed comment, and the weight of societal judgment. "Everyone is watching us," Elara murmured, her voice barely audible over the music, her hand trembling slightly in his. Julian's hand tightened reassuringly at her waist. "Let them watch," he replied, his gaze steady and warm upon her. "I am only concerned with your opinion, Elara, not theirs." His words were a balm, a shield against the disapproving stares and curious whispers. In his embrace, amidst the whirling dancers, Elara felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet defiance growing within her. "They think you've lost your mind, preferring me to Lydia," Elara whispered, a hint of her old insecurity creeping into her voice. Julian's grip tightened further, his dark eyes intense. "I haven't lost my mind, Elara," he corrected, his voice deep with conviction. "On the contrary, I believe I finally found it, and my heart as well." Elara stumbled slightly at his words, her breath catching in her throat. The ballroom, the music, the whispering crowd, all faded into an indistinct blur. Only Julian's face, etched with such profound sincerity, remained in focus. During the supper dance, as Elara and Julian moved through the elegant steps, Lady Seraphina Covington, beautiful and predatory in emerald silk, intercepted them. "Julian, darling," she purred, her voice dripping with false intimacy, completely ignoring Elara. "It's been an age since we've walked together. Surely you remember Vienna." She placed a possessive hand on his arm, her eyes, though smiling, holding a sharp, calculating glint. Her implied claim, the casual use of his Christian name, was a deliberate challenge, a reminder of their shared, complicated past. Lady Seraphina's perfect features arranged themselves into a sympathetic smile, though her eyes remained cold. "How kind of you to indulge Miss Vance's intellectual interests, Julian. Such a refreshing change from the usual social niceties, isn't it? Almost charitable." Elara felt a hot flush of humiliation rise to her cheeks. The thinly veiled insult, delivered with such saccharine sweetness, cut deeper than any overt cruelty. Seraphina's words were designed to diminish Elara, to paint her as a project rather than a partner. Before Elara could respond, Julian's voice cut through the air like ice, sharp and clear. There is nothing charitable about enjoying the company of an intelligent, genuine woman, Lady Covington. He removed her hand from his arm with a deliberate, almost imperceptible gesture. Now, if you'll excuse us, he added, his tone utterly dismissive. Our dance awaits. He turned to Elara gently, guiding her away from the stunned Lady Seraphina, his expression unyielding. His defense was swift, fierce, and utterly public. As they moved away, Elara whispered, "You shouldn't have antagonized her. Lady Covington is influential in society circles." Julian's grip tightened slightly, a silent reassurance. "I care nothing for her influence, Elara, and I won't allow anyone to assault you, not even the Queen herself." Despite his unwavering support, the sting of Seraphina's words lingered, a seed of doubt planted in Elara's heart. She knew Julian valued her intellect, but was that enough to overcome society's relentless focus on beauty? Later that evening, seeking a moment's respite from the dazzling, yet suffocating grandeur of the ballroom, Elara slipped onto a secluded balcony. She was lost in thought, the earlier exchange with Seraphina replaying in her mind when she overheard a voice from the adjacent, barely visible section of the balcony. It was Lady Seraphina speaking to a group of matrons. "It's obvious what Julian is doing," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "Everyone knows about his first wife's mental instability. He's seeking a sensible, plain wife this time, one who won't embarrass him with flights of fancy or attract other men's attention. Poor Miss Vance is merely convenient, bookish, forgettable, and unlikely to receive other offers." Elara froze, the cruel words cutting deeper than she wanted to admit, twisting the burgeoning hope in her heart into a knot of pain. Was that truly how Julian saw her? A safe, sensible alternative to a beautiful but potentially troublesome wife? Was her intelligence merely a convenient shield? Her lack of conventional beauty? A desirable trait, because it meant she wouldn't attract unwanted attention? The thought was a bitter poison, confirming her deepest, most ingrained insecurities. She was so lost in her painful thoughts that she didn't hear the balcony door open behind her. "Elara!" Julian's voice, usually so steady, was tinged with concern. She started, turning quickly, struggling to maintain a semblance of composure. "Are you unwell? You disappeared so suddenly." His brow was furrowed, his dark eyes searching hers. He had found her, but she wished he hadn't. The raw wound of Seraphina's words was too fresh, too painful to expose. She couldn't meet his gaze, afraid of what she might see reflected there. "Your Grace, I—" Elara's voice was stiff, formal, a stark contrast to the easy intimacy they had shared moments before. "Julian," he corrected gently, stepping closer. "When we're alone, I wish you would call me Julian." She shook her head, pulling back slightly. "I don't think that would be wise," she replied, her voice strained. "In fact, I think perhaps your attention to me has been misguided." The words felt like a betrayal, but the pain of Seraphina's accusations fueled her resolve. Julian's brow furrowed further. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice low and concerned. "I've overheard certain speculations about your intentions," Elara began, her voice trembling slightly. "That you seek a wife who is the opposite of your first. Someone plain, sensible, unlikely to cause scandal or attract admirers." Julian's expression darkened instantly. "Lady Covington, I presume. Her jealousy makes her vicious." But even as he spoke, Elara couldn't shake the brutal sting of the words. "Is it untrue, then?" Elara challenged, her hurt making her bold. "Do you deny that I am a stark contrast to the beautiful, vivacious women most men pursue?" Her voice cracked with the raw vulnerability of the question. "I know that a marquis is expected to marry a woman like my sister, beautiful, accomplished, bred to be an ornament to society. I know that your interest in me has caused speculation and confusion, and I know that I cannot bear to be chosen merely because I am safe and sensible." She looked at him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, demanding an answer. Julian took her hands in his dark eyes intense, unwavering. I deny that my interest in you is based on anything but genuine admiration and growing affection, Elara Vance, he replied, his voice firm, yet full of a raw vulnerability she had rarely witnessed. I have spent my life surrounded by beautiful, empty-headed women who care only for titles and wealth. My first marriage was a disaster precisely because I chose based on beauty and social expectations rather than character and compatibility. His voice softened, his gaze holding hers. From our first conversation, I recognized in you something rare and precious. A mind that challenges me, a spirit that doesn't bend to convention, a heart that remains genuine despite society's pressures. Your beauty, and yes, you are beautiful, though in a less conventional way than your sister, grows more apparent to me each time we meet. Elara trembled at the sincerity in his voice, his words a powerful balm to her wounded heart. Julian raised Elara's hands to his lips, pressing a tender kiss to her fingers. Her skin, still warm from the dance, tingled at his touch. Don't let Lady Covington's spite or society's expectations come between us, Elara, he murmured, his dark eyes intense, full of a fierce possessiveness that both thrilled and frightened her. Elara's heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. His words, his touch, had momentarily banished the cruel echoes of Lady Seraphina's pronouncements. For a precious few seconds, she allowed herself to believe, to hope. But the fragile moment was destined not to last. The balcony door burst open with a jarring suddenness, shattering the intimacy. Lady Eleanor stood framed in the doorway, Lydia a bewildered shadow behind her. Her mother's face was a mask of horrified indignation. "There you are, Elara! What in heaven's name are you doing alone with the Marquis? Come inside at once! It's most improper!" Lady Eleanor's voice, usually a carefully modulated instrument of social command, was shrill with scandalized agitation. Elara flinched, pulling her hands from Julian's grasp as if burned. The spell was broken, replaced by the harsh glare of societal judgment. Julian, though startled, recovered with remarkable swiftness. He turned to Lady Eleanor, his expression smooth, unruffled, despite the furious blush creeping up Elara's neck. "Lady Vance, the fault is entirely mine. I wished for a moment of private conversation with Miss Elara." Lady Eleanor's eyes widened further, her jaw dropping slightly. "Private conversation? Your Grace, while we are honored by your attention to our family, I must insist on propriety. If you wish to speak with Elara, it must be in the presence of a chaperone." Julian merely bowed, a hint of amusement flickering in his dark eyes. "Of course, Lady Vance. I was just telling Miss Elara how much I look forward to your family's garden party next week," Julian continued smoothly, his gaze briefly meeting Elara's, a subtle promise unspoken. "I understand you've invited much of London society." Lady Eleanor's expression, still tight with indignation, softened at the mention of her upcoming social triumph. "Indeed, Your Grace. It will be the event of the season. Lydia will perform several pieces on the harp." "Delightful," Julian murmured politely, though his eyes lingered on Elara. "Until then, Miss Elara." With a final, shared glance, he exited, leaving Elara to face her mother's silent fury. As their carriage rolled through London's darkened streets, Elara remained silent, her mind whirling with a dizzying mix of confusion, hope, and lingering doubt. Julian's impassioned words on the balcony had moved her deeply, yet Lady Seraphina's cruel accusations still gnawed at her. Could a man of his position, his wealth, his status, truly care for someone like her? Or was she merely a novelty, an amusement, a safe, sensible alternative, until he inevitably turned his attention to a more suitable match, a woman like Lydia? "You're very quiet, dear," Lord Alistair remarked gently from across the carriage. "Merely tired, father," Elara replied, though in truth she was more awake than she had ever been, her heart and mind alive with possibilities she had never dared to contemplate before, and fears she couldn't quell. The following morning, a tense silence hung over Ravenscroft Manor's dining room, broken only by the clink of cutlery. Mr. Finch, the butler, entered with uncharacteristic urgency, bearing a silver salver. "Excuse me, Lord Alistair, but this just arrived by special messenger. A most urgent letter from Lord Arthur Selwyn." Lord Alistair broke the seal, his gaze scanning the contents. As he read, his face darkened, the color draining from his cheeks until he looked profoundly unwell. Elara's stomach clenched. She knew with a dreadful certainty that this letter contained the culmination of Lady Seraphina's machinations. "Good gracious," Lord Alistair murmured, his voice strained. "There's been a most disturbing article published in tomorrow's edition of the Society Chronicle." "What does it say, Father?" Lydia asked, her voice anxious. Lord Alistair hesitated, glancing at Elara with a pained expression. "It concerns Lord Blackwood and raises questions about his first wife's death, and it also mentions an apparent understanding between Lord Blackwood and our Elara." Lady Eleanor snatched the letter from his trembling hand. Her eyes darted across the page, her gasp dramatic. Oh, this is dreadful. Listen to this." Sources close to the late Lady Annalise reveal that her tragic accident may have been the result of desperate unhappiness in her marriage. Now, society observers note with concern that the Marquis appears to be pursuing another unconventional match with the decidedly unexceptional elder daughter of Sir Alistair Vance. "Unexceptional!" Lord Alistair exploded, his face flushing crimson with anger. "How dare they speak of my daughter in such terms?" Elara sat frozen. The cruel word, a physical blow. The episode with the scandalous article had affected Lord Alistair deeply. His face, usually ruddy and robust, remained pale and drawn throughout the morning. The family physician was called, observing his elevated pulse and agitated state. "Sir Alistair," the physician advised gravely, "you must rest. Complete seclusion from visitors for the next few days, at the very least. Any further agitation could prove detrimental." Lord Alistair, uncharacteristically weary, nodded his acceptance. His illness would now provide Lady Eleanor with a desperate, if convenient excuse, to turn away any unwelcome callers, particularly Lord Blackwood. Despite the morning's devastating news and the physician's decree, Lord Julian Blackwood's elegant carriage arrived at Ravenscroft Manor precisely at noon. The household was in a state of controlled anxiety, hushed whispers replacing the usual bustle. "He's here." "Goodness!" Lady Eleanor exclaimed, frantically adjusting her own cap. "He's early!" Elara, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, found Julian pacing before the fireplace in the morning room. His expression was grim, but resolute. He turned at her entrance, his dark eyes softening, acknowledging her presence before Lady Eleanor could intervene. "Elara, thank you for seeing me." But before he could say more, Lady Eleanor burst into the room, her agitation palpable. "Your Grace, how unexpected! I'm afraid our household is in some disarray this morning. Perhaps you could call again tomorrow." "Mother, please," Elara began, but Julian spoke over her, his voice firm. "Lady Vance, I understand your concern given the unfortunate publication this morning. That is precisely why I must speak with Sir Alistair and with Miss Elara without delay." Lady Eleanor wrung her hands. "But Sir Alistair is not receiving visitors." "He's most upset about the article's implications regarding our family. Indeed, the physician has ordered complete rest. Surely, Your Grace, you can understand that, in light of these terrible accusations, a visit would be ill-advised." She tried desperately to persuade Julian to leave, her fear of social ruin evident in her pleading tone. "Then I shall speak plainly to you, madam." Julian drew himself up to his full height, his aristocratic bearing unmistakable, cutting through Lady Eleanor's frantic excuses. His voice, usually measured, now rang with a powerful conviction that silenced her protests. "I have come to request your daughter's hand in marriage." Lady Eleanor swayed, clutching the doorframe for support, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and utter disbelief. Elara felt as though the world had stopped spinning, her future hanging in the balance of this extraordinary, impossible moment. A profound silence fell over the room, broken only by Lady Eleanor's faint gasp. "Marriage?" Lady Eleanor stammered, her voice barely a whisper. But Lydia is engaged in correspondence lessons this morning. I'm certain she could be persuaded to." Julian's expression remained impassive, but his dark eyes held a hint of steel. "Not Lydia, Lady Vance. I wish to marry Elara. The words hung in the air. A shocking pronouncement that defied every expectation, every social norm Lady Eleanor held dear. Her porcelain face registered not just shock, but utter bewilderment, as if Julian had just announced his intention to marry a moonbeam. Elara's breath hitched. Lady Eleanor, finding her voice, rallied slightly. "This is most irregular, Your Grace. In light of this morning's publication, surely you understand that any connection between our families would be complicated, if not outright ruinous." Julian's gaze was unwavering. "I understand that malicious gossip should never stand in the way of genuine affection," he replied firmly, his voice resonating with an unshakable resolve. "I care deeply for your daughter, Lady Vance. I believe she returns my regard. With your blessing or without it, I intend to make her my Duchess." Elara felt a surge of warmth and defiance at his words. All eyes turned to Elara, who stood trembling with emotion, her heart a tumultuous mix of fear and exhilarating hope. She found her voice at last, though it was little more than a whisper. "Julian," she began, using his Christian name in front of her mother without thought, "are you certain?" "The scandal," Julian crossed to her, taking her hands in his dark eyes intense. "Scandals fade, Elara. What I feel for you will not." His voice softened, becoming more vulnerable than she had ever heard it. "If you'll have me, that is." The question hung in the air, a profound plea that demanded her answer, her choice. Before Elara could respond, Lord Alistair entered the room, leaning heavily on his cane, his face pale but resolute. "Your Grace," he said, his voice grave but steady. "I see you've braved the storm to call on us this morning, Sir Alistair." Julian bowed slightly, releasing Elara's hands only to extend one towards her father. "I've just informed Lady Vance of my wish to marry your daughter. I now formally request your blessing." Lord Alistair's expression softened, a proud, loving look directed at Elara. "You have it, Your Grace, if Elara wishes to accept you. But I must ask, are you prepared for the social consequences? This article, vicious though it is, will cause talk." "Let them talk," Julian replied, his grip firm. "I've lived too long concerned with appearances and society's expectations. What matters to me now is Elara's happiness, and my own." The commotion in the hallway interrupted the moment. Mr. Finch appeared, looking uncharacteristically flustered. "Forgive the intrusion, Sir Alistair, but Lady Seraphina Covington is demanding entrance. She claims it's a matter of utmost urgency." Lord Alistair frowned, his brow furrowed with annoyance. "The audacity! After what she's done." "Let her in," Julian said unexpectedly, his voice calm, but with an underlying steel that sent a shiver down Elara's spine. "I have a few words for Lady Covington myself." The door swung open, and Lady Seraphina swept into the morning room, magnificently attired in a morning dress of emerald silk. Her beautiful face registered shock at finding Julian already present. "Your Grace," Lady Seraphina purred, recovering swiftly, her eyes darting from Julian to Elara. "I came immediately when I saw that dreadful article. Such malicious falsehoods. I wanted to assure you of my support in this difficult time." Julian regarded her coldly, a chilling lack of warmth in his dark eyes. "How curious, Lady Covington, considering you were seen in close conversation with Mr. Jasper Croft at yesterday's garden party, immediately after which this dreadful article was written." Lady Seraphina's composure slipped momentarily, a flicker of panic in her eyes, before she regained her practiced smile. "A coincidence, surely. Mr. Croft approaches many people for society gossip." "Indeed." Julian's voice was dangerously quiet, his gaze unwavering. "Then you deny providing him with information about my first wife? Or about my current infatuation?" "Of course I deny it." Lady Seraphina's voice rose indignantly. "Lady Annalise was my dear friend. I would never dishonor her memory." "Then perhaps you can explain this." Julian reached into his coat pocket, producing a folded letter. "A message from Mr. Croft to you, Lady Covington, mistakenly delivered to my secretary this morning. He thanks you for your invaluable insights regarding my first marriage and my current infatuation with the plain Ashford girl." Lady Seraphina blanched, her carefully applied rouge suddenly stark against her pallor. That's a forgery, is it? Shall we summon Mr. Croft to verify his handwriting?" Julian's voice was still dangerously quiet, yet it commanded absolute attention. "Or perhaps you'd prefer I speak with Lord Covington about your activities. I understand he's most concerned about the family's reputation since your late husband's passing, and I am certain a public scandal involving a marquis and a malicious gossip columnist would not be to his liking." Lady Seraphina's eyes widened, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered, her voice laced with fear. "I would," Julian replied, his expression implacable, "if you continue to spread malicious lies about me, or about Miss Elara. Consider carefully, Lady Covington. Your position in society is precarious enough without making an enemy of me." Lady Seraphina's beautiful face contorted with fury, her carefully cultivated elegance dissolving into raw, bitter resentment. "You're making a grave mistake, Julian," she hissed, her eyes blazing. "This nobody," she gestured dismissively at Elara, who flinched despite herself, "this plain, penniless blue-talking will never be accepted as the Duchess of Blackwood. You'll be laughing-stocks. The Marquis who married an academic over the most beautiful women in England." The cruel words, designed to wound, hung heavy in the air, aimed directly at Elara's deepest insecurities. But Julian merely smiled, a cold, aristocratic smile that reminded everyone present of his formidable power and unyielding position. He moved to stand beside Elara, taking her hand in his, a clear gesture of protection and defiance. "You mistake me, Lady Covington, if you think I care for society's acceptance. And you mistake Miss Elara entirely if you think her worth lies in conventional beauty or a large dowry." His voice resonated with a quiet strength that filled the room. "I choose her for her intelligence, her character, her genuine heart. Qualities you might wish to cultivate yourself." Elara felt a profound wave of gratitude and love wash over her, his words a balm to her wounded spirit. Lady Eleanor, who had been watching this exchange with wide eyes, her initial horror slowly transforming into a dawning understanding and then, astonishingly pride, suddenly straightened her shoulders. She looked at Lady Seraphina, her own aristocratic bearing reasserting itself with unexpected dignity. "Lady Covington," she said, her voice firm, "I believe it's time for you to leave. My daughter's engagement to the Marquis is a cause for celebration, not your bitter recriminations." Lady Seraphina stared at her in disbelief, her fury momentarily eclipsed by shock. "You support this farce of a match? Your plain, awkward daughter stealing a marquis from your beautiful one." "My daughter," Lady Eleanor replied, her head held high, "has captured the heart of one of England's finest gentlemen through her own merits. I would be a poor mother indeed if I failed to recognize her good fortune or his." Lady Seraphina looked from face to face, finding no allies, before sweeping from the room defeated. In the silence that followed Lady Seraphina's bitter exit, a profound stillness settled over the Ravenscroft morning room. Elara's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She felt as though she had been holding her breath for an eternity. Julian turned to her, his dark eyes, no longer cold with anger, softened with an emotion so raw and tender it stole her breath. "I believe, Miss Vance," he said, his voice a gentle reminder, "that you have not yet answered my question." Elara looked up into his eyes, seeing in them all the promise of a future she had never dared to imagine. The world had stopped spinning, and in that moment, only Julian in her hopeful heart existed. The doubts, the cruel words, the societal expectations, they faded into insignificance. "If you're absolutely certain, Julian," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "if you are truly willing to face all this for me, then yes, with all my heart." A smile of such profound joy transformed Julian's austere features that even Lady Eleanor, still recovering from Seraphina's venom, was momentarily moved to silence. Julian's face beamed, radiating a warmth Elara had only glimpsed until now. He turned to Lord Alistair, his hand still gently clasping Elara's. "Then, with your blessing, Sir Alistair, and with Elara's gracious acceptance, may I formally announce our engagement." Lord Alistair, his own eyes misty with pride, clasped Julian's hand warmly. "You have it, Your Grace. Nothing would give me greater pleasure than to see my daughter so happily matched." It was a declaration that spoke volumes of his unwavering faith in Elara. Lady Eleanor, regaining her composure, though still dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, stepped forward. "And I," she added, her voice a little tearful but brimming with her characteristic zeal, "shall begin planning the most magnificent wedding London has seen this decade. My daughter shall become a duchess in style, of course." Elara exchanged a small, amused glance with Julian. Her mother's rapid transition from dismay to enthusiastic social planning never ceased to amaze them both. But it was a welcome sight nonetheless. The engagement was officially announced in the Times, a bold declaration that sent ripples through London society. A steady stream of congratulatory notes and curious visitors followed, some undoubtedly motivated more by gossip than genuine goodwill. As for Lady Seraphina, the sting of Julian's public exposure, coupled with his quiet threat to involve Lord Covington regarding her activities, proved too much. She departed for Paris shortly after the confrontation at Ravenscroft Manor, ostensibly for health reasons, though society whispered that her hasty exit had more to do with the Marquis of Blackwood's formidable influence. The scandal Lady Seraphina had so confidently predicted largely failed to materialize. The initial gossip following the newspaper article was swiftly countered by Julian's solicitors, who threatened legal action against the Society Chronicle unless a retraction was published. Faced with the Marquis's formidable influence, the paper quickly complied, printing an apology and dismissing Mr. Jasper Croft. Society, ever fickle, quickly adjusted. The whispers about Julian choosing the plain Ashford girl gave way to speculation that he had recognized something special in Elara that others had missed. Many, particularly those who had once dismissed her, now claimed to have always said Elara possessed a certain distinction. Lord Alistair, proving particularly steadfast, proudly escorted his elder daughter to social functions, beaming with undisguised pleasure whenever Julian joined them. "I always knew my Elara was extraordinary," he told anyone who would listen. It merely took an extraordinary man to recognize it. Elara accepted this revisionist history with gracious amusement, exchanging knowing glances with Julian whenever such comments were made. They both understood the fleeting nature of society's approval and placed little value in it. The weeks following the engagement announcement passed in a whirlwind of preparations, social calls, and adjusted expectations. Lady Eleanor, having recovered from her initial shock, threw herself into wedding plans with characteristic enthusiasm, while Lydia proved to be Elara's most steadfast supporter, deflecting curious questions and cruel remarks with calm dignity. "You seem different lately, sister," Elara remarked one afternoon as they sorted through fabric samples in the drawing room. More serene somehow. Lydia smiled. A genuine smile rather than her practiced social one. "Perhaps I am. Watching you with the Marquis, with Julian, has been illuminating. You found something real, Elara, something beyond pretty manners and social expectations." "I hope to find the same." Elara squeezed her sister's hand. "You will, Lydia, someone who sees past your beauty to the person beneath." As the wedding day approached, final preparations reached a fever pitch. Miss Albright, having completed her duties as governess now that both Vance daughters were destined for matrimony, accepted a position with a family in Bath. She promised, however, to return for the ceremony. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she told Elara warmly during their farewell. "To see you take your rightful place as a duchess. It validates everything I believed about you from the beginning, Miss Elara." Lara felt a surge of gratitude for the quiet woman who had always seen her. The night before the ceremony, unable to sleep, Elara wandered down to the library at Ravenscroft. To her surprise, she found her father there, gazing thoughtfully at a family portrait painted when Elara was 16 and Lydia 14. "Papa," she used the childhood name spontaneously. "Couldn't you sleep either?" Lord Alistair turned with a warm smile. "Just reminiscing, my dear. Tomorrow my eldest daughter becomes a duchess. Quite a change from the little girl who used to sit on my knee while I read Shakespeare." Elara joined him before the portrait. I'm still that girl in many ways. Books and Papa's stories, those were my greatest joys. And now? He asked gently. What brings you joy now, Elara? Julian, she answered without hesitation. The way he sees me, truly sees me, when for so long I felt invisible. The life we'll build together at Blackwood. The good we might do with his resources and position. Lord Alister's eyes grew misty. I've always been proud of you, Elara. Your mother and we perhaps focused too much on Lydia's prospects, thinking your happiness lay in intellectual pursuits rather than marriage. I hope you can forgive us for not seeing your full potential. There's nothing to forgive, Papa, Elara assured him, leaning her head on his shoulder as she had as a child. I didn't see it myself until Julian showed me what was possible. The quiet moment was a healing balm, a testament to the enduring love that transcended past oversights and societal pressures. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, a perfect June morning. The ceremony was everything Lady Eleanor had dreamed. St. George's, Hanover Square was filled with flowers and London's elite, a royal representative even in attendance. Lydia, resplendent as maid of honor in a gown of rose silk, smiled at Elara from the altar. Lord Alister, proud and emotional, escorted Elara down the aisle. From her seat near the front, Miss Albright watched with quiet pride as her former pupil approached the altar with dignified grace, her simple grace outshining any fleeting beauty. But for Elara, the only moment that truly mattered was when she reached Julian at the altar and saw the love, shining, clear and unwavering in his dark eyes as he took her hand in his. "You are beautiful," he whispered, his voice pitched for her ears alone as they turned to face the clergyman. And for perhaps the first time in her life, Elara truly felt beautiful. Not because of her appearance, though Sophie had worked wonders with her chestnut hair and the white Duchess satin gown was indeed magnificent, but because of the way Julian looked at her, as though she were the only woman in the world, the only woman for him. The vows were exchanged, the rings placed on trembling fingers, and with a kiss that balanced dignity with genuine emotion, Elara Vance became her Grace, the Duchess of Blackwood. The sacred words sealed not just a union, but a promise of a future built on understanding, respect, and a love that saw beyond all labels. The reception at Ravenscroft Manor was a glittering affair. Even Lady Eleanor had to admit that society had embraced the match with unexpected enthusiasm. The initial whispers about the Marquis choosing the plain Ashford girl had given way to speculation that he had recognized something special in Elara that others had missed, leading many to reassess their own judgment of her. "Your Grace," Lady Harrington murmured, as she congratulated Elara. "I always said you had a certain distinction about you, not conventional beauty, perhaps, but a genuine elegance that surpasses mere prettiness." Elara accepted this revisionist history with gracious amusement, exchanging knowing glances with Julian whenever such comments were made. They both understood the fickleness of society's approval, and neither placed much value in it. What did touch Elara deeply were the genuine well-wishes from those who had shown her kindness before her elevation. Miss Albright, who had always encouraged her intellectual pursuits. Mr. Finch, whose dignified service had often included small considerations for Miss Elara's comfort. And of course, Sophie, who wept openly as she helped Elara change from her wedding gown into a traveling costume for the journey to Dover, where they would catch the packet to France to begin their honeymoon. Now, Sophie," Elara chided gently. "No tears today. You'll be joining us at Blackwood in a month, remember? This is hardly goodbye." "I know, Your Grace," Sophie sniffled, still struggling to use Elara's new title. "It's just, I'm so happy for you. You deserve all this joy." Elara hugged her impulsively. "Thank you, Sophie, for believing that even before I did." Julian had also quietly assured Sophie that her position at Blackwood Castle would be waiting for her, a gesture that brought Elara immense comfort. As the newlywed couple prepared to depart, Lydia approached with an unexpected gift. A leather-bound journal embossed with Elara's new monogram. "For recording your adventures as a Duchess," she explained, embracing her sister warmly, "and perhaps for drafting that novel you've always talked about writing." "Lydia, how thoughtful!" Elara was genuinely touched. "I'll treasure it. Just promise me one thing," Lydia whispered in her ear. "When you write your story, don't cast me as the shallow, beautiful sister. I'd like to think I'm a bit more complex than that." Elara laughed, squeezing her sister's hand. "I promise. You'll be the beautiful sister with hidden depths and a generous heart." Lord Alister's farewell was emotional but brief. "Be happy, my girl," he said simply, pressing a fatherly kiss to her forehead. "That's all I've ever wanted for you." Lady Eleanor, to everyone's surprise, was weeping openly. "My daughter, a duchess," she kept repeating, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "And such a love match. Who would have thought it? Not you, certainly, mother," Elara replied with gentle humor, kissing her cheek. "But I forgive you completely." At last, amidst a shower of rose petals and cheers from the assembled guests, Julian handed Elara into their traveling carriage. As the door closed, giving them their first moment of privacy all day, he drew her into his arms. "Happy, my Duchess?" he murmured against her temple. "Blissfully," she sighed, relaxing into his embrace. "Though I confess, I'm relieved the ceremony is over, all those eyes watching us." "They were watching you," Julian corrected, his voice warm with affection. "And no wonder. You were radiant today, Elara." She smiled up at him. "It's still strange to think that I'm actually your wife now, that this isn't some elaborate dream from which I'll awaken back in the library at Ravenscroft, alone with my books." "If it's a dream," he replied, his dark eyes intent on hers, "then we're sharing it, and I have no desire to wake." His kiss was deeper now, freed from the constraints of public observation, and Elara responded with the same passion that had surprised them both during their courtship. For all her bookish exterior, she had discovered within herself a capacity for emotion and desire that matched Julian's own. Their honeymoon, a month touring France and Italy, was a revelation for both of them. Away from London's prying eyes and social expectations, they discovered each other fully, not just as lovers, but as companions, confidants, and partners. Julian delighted in showing Elara the art and architecture she had previously known only through books, while she introduced him to literary salons and philosophical discussions that enriched his understanding of the world. "I've never seen Paris like this before," he confessed one evening as they strolled along the Seine. "Through your eyes, everything is fresh, meaningful. I've traveled all my life, yet I feel as though I'm truly seeing these places for the first time." Elara squeezed his arm. "That's how I feel about everything since meeting you, Julian, as though I was half asleep before. And now I'm fully awake to life's possibilities." By the time they returned to England and journeyed north to Blackwood Castle, they had grown even closer, their bond strengthened by shared experiences and deepening trust. Elara had shed much of her initial insecurity, while Julian had revealed vulnerabilities beneath his aristocratic reserve that few had ever been permitted to see. Their arrival at Blackwood, as husband and wife, was marked by celebration throughout the estate. Tenant farmers and their families lined the approach road, cheering for their Marquis and new Duchess. The staff had decorated the castle entrance with flowers and greenery, while Mrs. Ellis, the housekeeper, had prepared a welcome feast that showcased the best of Yorkshire's produce. "Your first official duty as Duchess will be tomorrow morning," Julian informed Elara that evening as they relaxed in the private sitting room adjoining their bedchambers. "Traditionally, the Lady of Blackwood distributes food and medical supplies to the tenants on the first of each month." Elara looked up from her book with interest. "That sounds like an excellent tradition. Will you accompany me?" "If you wish, though it's typically the Duchess's domain. My mother was particularly devoted to the welfare of our tenants. The older families still speak of her with great affection." Elara closed her book, marking her place carefully. "Tell me about her, Julian. You rarely mention your parents." A shadow passed over his face. "My father was a complicated man, brilliant in business matters, expanding the Blackwood holdings considerably during his lifetime, but cold in personal relationships. My mother was his opposite, warm, compassionate, beloved by all who knew her." "You take after her, I think," Elara said softly. He raised an eyebrow. "Most would say I inherited my father's austerity." "On the surface, perhaps," she countered. But I've seen the man beneath, the one who notices when a servant is unwell, who remembers the names of tenant children, who created a private library for his bookish wife." Julian rose and came to sit beside her, taking her hand in his. "You see me too clearly, Elara. I've spent years cultivating a forbidding exterior, yet you penetrated it within moments of our first meeting." "Just as you saw past my plain appearance to the woman beneath," she replied. "We're well matched in that way, I think." The following morning, Elara rose early, eager for her first official duty as Duchess. Sophie, who had arrived from London the previous week, helped her dress in a practical but elegant gown of deep green wool, suitable for moving among the tenant cottages. "The staff is saying the tenants are most excited to meet you, Your Grace," Sophie reported as she arranged Elara's hair in a simple but dignified style. "There hasn't been a duchess in residence for so long, and the Marquis has spoken so warmly of you." "Has he indeed?" Elara smiled at the thought. "Well, I shall do my best not to disappoint them." The distribution took place in the castle's great hall, where long tables had been set up with baskets of food, bundles of clothing, and medicinal supplies. As each tenant family approached, Mr. Finch announced their name and farm, while Mrs. Ellis, the housekeeper, quietly informed Elara of any particular needs or circumstances she should know. "The Wilsons, Your Grace, from North Pasture Farm. Mrs. Wilson is expecting their 6th child next month." Elara greeted the sturdy farmer and his weary-looking wife with genuine warmth. "Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Wilson, a pleasure to meet you. I understand congratulations are in order." Mrs. Wilson curtsied awkwardly, hampered by her advanced pregnancy. "Thank you, Your Grace. We're hoping for a girl this time, after 5 boys." "Girls can be a blessing," Elara agreed, signaling for an extra package of baby linens to be added to the Wilsons' basket. "Though I'm sure your sons are a credit to you." "They are that, Your Grace," Mr. Wilson affirmed proudly. "The oldest, Tom, has a way with horses that even the Marquis has noticed. Perhaps he might be considered for a position in the stables when he's older." Elara suggested, making a mental note to mention it to Julian. "Good horsemanship is always valued at Blackwood." The Wilsons departed, beaming, and so it continued through the morning, Elara learning names and circumstances, offering not just material assistance, but genuine interest in the lives of those dependent on the estate. Julian observed from nearby, occasionally adding his own comments, but largely allowing Elara to establish her own relationship with the tenants. "You were magnificent," he told her afterward as they walked through the kitchen gardens where summer vegetables were ripening in neat rows. "The tenants are already half in love with their new Duchess," Elara laughed. "Hardly that, but they seemed pleased to be heard. So many mentioned your mother's kindness, how she remembered their children's names, inquired after elderly relatives, knew exactly which families needed extra support." "You remind me of her," Julian said softly. "She would have adored you, Elara. I wish I could have known her." Elara stopped to examine a particularly fine stand of rosemary. "I have so much to learn about managing an estate of this size. Your mother seems to have set a high standard." "You'll exceed it," Julian said with conviction. "Already you've suggested improvements to the tenant cottages that neither my mother nor I considered. Those new ventilation systems from your father's estate will make a significant difference to health conditions." As summer gave way to autumn, Elara settled into her role as Duchess of Blackwood with growing confidence. She established a lending library for tenant children, updated the estate's accounting systems, and implemented modern sanitation improvements in the village, all while mastering the social duties expected of her position. Julian watched her flourish with pride and delight. "You were born for this role," he told her one crisp October evening as they shared a quiet dinner in their private dining room. "Blackwood has never been better managed." High praise from a man who once managed it single-handedly, she teased, though pleasure at his approval warmed her. "But I do love it, Julian. The responsibility, the chance to make meaningful improvements, even the social obligations, though I confess I still prefer our quiet evenings alone to grand entertainments." "As do I." He reached across the table to take her hand. "Which is why I've been thinking perhaps we might limit our time in London this season. Unless you've developed a taste for ballrooms and soirees?" Elara laughed. Goodness knows, I'm perfectly content to remain at Blackwood for the winter, though we should perhaps visit my family at Christmas. Lydia's letters hint that she may have news to share. A suitor at last. I suspected as much from Sir Alister's latest correspondence. He mentioned a certain Lord James Selwyn paying particular attention to her. Lord James Selwyn? Elara's eyes widened. Why, he's considered the most eligible bachelor in England since you were unmarried. How appropriate that he should be drawn to Lydia. Julian's expression grew thoughtful. Actually, I met young Selwyn at my club last month. Intelligent fellow, interested in agricultural improvements and tenant welfare. Not at all the usual society fop. I think he might see beyond Lydia's beauty to the person beneath, just as you saw me, Elara finished softly. Oh, I do hope so. Lydia deserves someone who values her true self. They were interrupted by a discreet knock at the door. Mr. Finch entered, bearing a silver salver with a telegram from London. Your Grace, marked, urgent. Julian opened it, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern as he read. It's from Sir Alister. Lady Eleanor has fallen ill. Influenza, the doctors believe. They request our immediate return to London. Elara rose immediately. We must go at once. If you'll excuse me, I'll speak with Sophie about packing. Of course, he assured her. I'll have the carriage prepared and send a telegram that we'll depart on the morning train. They reached London the following evening to find Ravenscroft Manor in a state of controlled anxiety. Sir Alister greeted them in the entrance hall, his face drawn with worry. Thank you for coming so quickly. The doctor says the crisis has passed, but Eleanor remains very weak. She's been asking for you, Elara. I'll go to her at once, Elara said, already removing her traveling gloves. Julian, would you wait here with Sir Alister? Take all the time you need, he assured her. Lady Eleanor lay propped against pillows in her darkened bedchamber, her normally vibrant face pale and drawn. She roused slightly as Elara entered. Elara, is that you, my dear? Yes, Mother. Elara approached the bed, taking her mother's frail hand. Julian and I came as soon as we received Father's telegram. How are you feeling? Better now that you're here. Lady Eleanor's voice was weak but determined. The doctors are being ridiculous, keeping me confined like this. I have so much to do. Lydia's presentation at court is in just 2 months. Lydia can wait, Elara said firmly. Your health is more important. Lady Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. You're a good girl, Elara. I haven't always. That is to say, I should have. Hush, Mother. Elara squeezed her hand gently. There's no need for this. There is, Lady Eleanor insisted, some of her old vigor returning briefly. I misjudged you, Elara. I was so fixed on Lydia's beauty, so certain it was the path to a brilliant match, that I overlooked your qualities. Can you forgive a foolish mother? Elara felt a surge of compassion. For all her social ambitions and sometimes shallow values, Lady Eleanor had always wanted what she believed was best for her daughters. There's nothing to forgive, she assured her. You raised me to be educated, well-mannered, capable, all qualities that serve me well as a duchess. And you must have done something right, for Julian fell in love with me despite my lack of conventional beauty. Lady Eleanor managed a small smile. He's a man of discernment, your Marquis. I see that now. And you've blossomed, Elara. There's a confidence about you. A radiance that has nothing to do with physical beauty. That's Julian's doing, Elara admitted. He sees me in a way no one else ever has. No, my dear, Lady Eleanor corrected, surprising her. The qualities were always there. He merely recognized what the rest of us were too blind to see. Over the following days, Lady Eleanor's health improved steadily. By the week's end, she was well enough to join the family for tea in the drawing-room, though still wrapped in shawls and confined to a chaise longue. Now, she declared once pleasantries had been exchanged, Lydia must tell Elara her news. I've been absolutely bursting to discuss it, but Sir Alister insisted we wait until I was stronger. Lydia blushed prettily, exchanging a glance with her father. "It's hardly official yet, Mother. Lord James has not formally spoken to Father, but he will." "He will," Lady Eleanor insisted. "Anyone can see the young man is besotted, and with good reason. You were magnificent at Lady Harrington's musical last month. Everyone said your performance on the harp was unparalleled." "Actually," Lydia said hesitantly, "Lord James and I mostly discussed books that evening. He's quite knowledgeable about poetry, particularly the romantic poets." Elara exchanged a surprised look with Julian. "Books? Lydia, I had no idea you were interested in poetry." "I wasn't particularly," her sister admitted, "but after seeing how you and Julian connected over literature, I thought perhaps I should expand my interests beyond music and watercolors. So I've been reading more, visiting museums, attending lectures at the Royal Society." "And Lord James shares these interests?" Julian inquired. Lydia nodded, her blue eyes brightening. "He does. He thinks a woman should have an educated mind as well as accomplishments. He says—" She hesitated, then continued with more confidence. "He says beauty fades, but intelligence and character endure." Wise words. Julian approved, his hand finding Elara's. "It seems the Selwyn men have excellent taste in women." The family's time in London extended through Christmas and into the New Year, as Lady Eleanor continued her recovery. During this period, Lord James Selwyn became a frequent visitor to Ravenscroft Manor, his admiration for Lydia growing increasingly evident. "He's going to propose," Elara predicted to Julian one evening as they prepared for a small dinner party, "perhaps even tonight." "I believe you're right," Julian agreed, adjusting his cravat. "Sir Alistair mentioned that Selwyn requested a private meeting this afternoon." "I am so pleased for Lydia," Elara said, fastening a pearl necklace, a wedding gift from Julian. "Lord James seems genuinely to appreciate her for herself, not just her beauty." "A fortunate circumstance that appears to run in your family," Julian observed with a smile. "Though I must say, my love, you look particularly beautiful tonight." Elara turned from the mirror to face him, her amber eyes warm with affection. "Flattery, your grace." "Merely the truth, Duchess." He drew her into his arms, careful not to disturb her carefully arranged hair. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" "Not since breakfast," she teased, echoing their early courtship. "But I believe we have a few moments before we must join the others." Later that evening, their suspicions were confirmed when Sir Alistair called for attention at the dinner table. "Lady Eleanor and I are delighted to announce the engagement of our daughter Lydia to Lord James Selwyn. We could not be more pleased with this match." As champagne was poured and congratulations offered, Elara observed her sister's radiant happiness with satisfaction. Lydia and Lord James sat close together, their conversation animated and intimate, displaying the same genuine connection that Elara had found with Julian. "A love match after all," Lady Eleanor murmured to Elara as they watched the young couple. "Who would have thought both my daughters would marry for affection rather than advantage?" "Perhaps affection is the greatest advantage," Elara suggested. "Shared values, mutual respect, genuine attachment. These form a stronger foundation than any title or fortune." Lady Eleanor patted her hand. "So wise, my dear. I begin to think that it is I who should have been learning from you all these years, rather than the reverse." By February, with Lady Eleanor fully recovered and Lydia's engagement officially announced in the Times, Elara and Julian prepared to return to Blackwood. "You will visit us this summer, won't you?" Elara asked her family on their final evening together. "The Scottish moors are magnificent in August, and Julian has promised to teach me fly fishing." "We wouldn't miss it," Sir Alistair assured her. Lydia and Lord James might join us after their wedding in June, a chance for the newlyweds to become better acquainted with their future relatives. As farewells were exchanged the following morning, Lydia drew Elara aside for a private moment. "I've been meaning to ask, are you happy, truly happy as a duchess?" "All the responsibilities, the social expectations, the constant scrutiny." Elara considered the question seriously. "I am, though not because of the title or position." I'm happy because I'm loved for myself, valued for my mind and character rather than my appearance or accomplishments. The rest, the castle, the wealth, the social status, those are merely circumstances, not the essence of my contentment. Lydia nodded thoughtfully. That's what I hoped you'd say, because that's how I feel with James. For the first time, I'm appreciated for more than my face or my musical abilities. He sees the person I want to become. Then you have everything that matters, Elara assured her, embracing her sister warmly. The journey back to Blackwood was peaceful, both Julian and Elara content with the quiet companionship they had established. As their carriage wound through the familiar Yorkshire landscape, Elara gazed out at the misty moors, a sense of homecoming filling her heart. "Happy to be returning?" Julian asked, observing her expression. "Very much so," she replied. "I love my family dearly, but Blackwood is home now, our home." He took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I have a confession, my love. When I first returned to London last spring, I had no intention of participating in the season. It was my solicitor who persuaded me that I should at least make an appearance at a few key events, and thank goodness he did," Elara laughed. "Else we might never have met." "We might not have met then," Julian corrected. "But I believe we would have found each other eventually. Some connections, Elara, are simply meant to be." One afternoon, a month after their return to Blackwood, Elara found herself alone in the library when Sophie arrived, carrying a small package. "This just arrived for you, Your Grace," she said, handing Elara an elegantly wrapped parcel. "From London, I believe." Curious, Elara unwrapped it to find a beautifully bound book. Inside was an inscription in Lydia's flowing hand. "For my dearest sister, whose story has taught me that true beauty lies within. With love, Lydia." Sophie hesitated by the door. "Your Grace, if I might speak with you about something." "Of course, Sophie," Elara replied, setting the book aside. "Is everything all right?" Sophie entered hesitantly, dressed not in her usual lady's maid attire, but in a simple but respectable day dress, having just returned from the village where she'd posted her weekly letter to her family in Kent. "I've had a letter from home," she began nervously. "My aunt in Bath has offered me a position as companion. It's a good position, with fair wages and kind treatment." "You're leaving?" Elara felt a pang of genuine loss. "But why? Have you been unhappy here?" "No, Your Grace. Not at all. But I thought perhaps with you settled now as Duchess, you might prefer someone more experienced as your lady's maid." Elara rose and took Sophie's hands in hers. "Sophie, you've been more than a lady's maid to me. You've been a friend when I most needed one. I don't want you to go." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "That's very kind, Your Grace, but what place would there be for me at Blackwood? The Marquis will have his own staff, and I'm sure the Duchess's lady's maid is a much grander person than I." "Actually," came a deep voice from the doorway, "the Marquis would be honored if you would consider continuing in your role." Both women turned in surprise to find Julian standing there. He stepped into the room with an apologetic smile. "Forgive me for interrupting. I had come to the library to speak with Elara about our upcoming visit to the North Country estates, and was about to knock when I overheard your conversation. I couldn't help but intervene." "Your Grace!" Sophie dropped into a deep curtsy. "Miss Davies!" Julian nodded pleasantly. "Forgive my interruption, but I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. Elara has spoken often of your kindness and support. Such loyalty deserves recognition, not dismissal." Sophie looked bewildered. "But surely the Duchess of Blackwood must have a lady's maid with more experience." "The Duchess of Blackwood?" Julian replied with a warm glance at Elara. "Should have, whatever makes her comfortable and happy. If that includes retaining a trusted friend in her household, I am entirely supportive." Elara's heart swelled with love for this man who understood her so well. "You see, Sophie, there's a place for you at Blackwood if you want it." Sophie hesitated. "You truly wish me to come with you, Miss Elara?" "I do, very much. A smile broke across Sophie's face. "Then I accept with gratitude. I'll write to my aunt immediately." After she had gone, Elara turned to Julian. "That was very kind of you." He drew her into his arms, propriety momentarily forgotten in the privacy of the library. "Not kind, sensible. You need people around you who knew you before you were a duchess, who value you for yourself rather than your title." As Blackwood Castle came into view, its gray stones glowing in the afternoon light, Elara Montrose, Duchess of Blackwood, leaned into her husband's embrace, secure in the knowledge that she had found what few ever achieve. A love based not on fleeting physical attraction, but on genuine understanding, shared values, and mutual respect. The beauty others had failed to see in her had been recognized by the one person who mattered most. And in that recognition she had discovered not only love, but her own true worth. A transformation more precious than any title, more enduring than any conventional beauty could ever be. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "my mother always believed beauty was the key to happiness, that Lydia's lovely face would secure her future, while my plain features confined me to spinsterhood." "Your mother was wrong," Julian said simply. "True beauty lies in the depth of one's character, the strength of one's mind, the generosity of one's heart. By that measure, Elara, you are the most beautiful woman I've ever known."